Working? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Um, shall I begin? Do we have the people online? Do we have the people online? Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much for your warm welcome and for inviting me to join your meeting here in Bangkok. What I propose to do shortly today is first to give an overview of where we are at the international level about climate change education. Then a short review, a literature review, what does educational science tells us about what works and what does not work in terms of climate change education. And I will probably finish by providing some feedbacks about our own experience on the field. And I will be happy to join you for the meeting after that and discuss what we can do together in Southeast Asia. So, just a very few words about the Office for Climate Education, because it has been already, oops, it does not work. Excuse me. Yeah, okay. So the Office for Climate Education has been created 8 years ago. We are based in Paris, inside the Sorbonne University. And our purpose is to support education systems, and especially teachers, but also policymakers, to implement quality climate change education. And I will say in a few moments what does it mean, quality climate change education. So as it has been said already, we are a UNESCO center, but we are also an IPCC observer organization. So, and we are the only education organization in the world that has an official partnership with the IPCC, actually. And we are co-coordinators of the Greening Education Partnership. I will say a few words about that in a moment. So basically, our action at the Office for Climate Education divide into different categories. So first, when we created the OCE, the first mission of the OCE was to support the IPCC reports by education materials in line with this report. So we developed a lot of education resources. All our resources are open education resources. So there is no license to pay to use them, and they are all free to use and free to adapt, which is very much very important. So we developed a lot of educational materials, so lesson plans, multimedia animations, simulators, videos, online courses, and so on. So resources for teachers, for teacher trainers, and for students also. But I would say that today our main activity is teacher professional development. So so far we have trained more than 100,000 teachers, half in France and half overseas, so in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, actually. And so we do teacher training, but we also train teacher trainers more and more, actually, and also policymakers, so people working in the ministries of education, inspectors, curriculum developers, etc., etc. And we implement, we support education system on different aspects by providing expertise, but also by designing with them and implementing with the local partners pilot programs. I will say a few words about this kind of programs. So the idea is to conduct local projects to be able to scale up at the end. And we also have some research activities. So we have a research team at the OCE working on different topics. Like it's written here, eco-anxiety, which is a growing problem actually in the schools, future literacy, impact evaluation of climate education, and so on. So just a few words about why why do we focus on climate change education? Because we are not working on STEM education, we are not working on education for sustainable development, we are 100% climate change education. And the reason is the following. For the last few years, you may have remarked that there is a very strong demand from the youth to receive an education specifically on this topic of climate change. And this movement of the youth has been the same worldwide, not only in France where I belong, but also in Asia here. So this picture, I think, has been taken in Malaysia, if I'm not wrong. But the problem is that despite the very strong demand by the youth and despite also the very strong demand by the teachers, because UNESCO made a survey a few years ago, 2 years ago, showing that almost 90% of the teachers worldwide consider it is very important to teach climate change. Only a very few portion of them feel able to do it. But despite this very strong demand by the field, there is very little implementation. So, first of all, there is a very little integration of climate change in itself in the curricula. Only 2% of the countries, only 2% of the countries in this study made by UNESCO are considered to really implement climate change into the curricula, but most of the time it's a very short appearance in a few words from here to there. But the problem is that if there is no real integration into the curricula, if there is no time to implement in the class, there is no teacher training, there is no education materials, there is nothing basically. And so at the end, we have different indicators. I don't want to go into the details, but we consider that worldwide there is less than 2% of the teachers that do implement climate change education in their class, STEM teachers or ESD teachers. And so there is a strong gap. And as a consequence, you've got a very large portion of the youth that is aware that the climate is changing, but is not able to explain why and how, and what are the impacts, and what we can do about it. So there is a very strong gap. Climate change education is not here to raise awareness. Young people already know that climate is changing. They will not learn it at school, but they have to understand why, how, and what we can do. And since they don't understand it, they know it, but they don't understand, it creates a lot of anxiety. And now this is a growing problem. Here it's the very first study that has been made a few years ago in a dozen of countries, including some Asian countries actually. And yeah, basically now we consider that almost 80% of the youth, so students from 15 to 20 basically, suffer from eco-anxiety. And when we ask what are the reasons for this anxiety, climate change is really at the top, far beyond all the other reasons. So it puts some questions about the quality of our education systems to cope with this global problem that is climate change. Hopefully, things are changing. Sorry, oops. Yeah, things are changing because at the international level, in the Paris Agreement, if you know it by heart, there is the Article 12 putting an emphasis on the need for public awareness and education. The reason is that adapting our economy, our societies to climate change and mitigating climate change is very costly, very costly, very difficult. And it cannot be done. We will not succeed if the populations do not understand why we have to do that and how to do it. And so education is at the very center of the Paris Agreement. And so there is a mechanism called ACE, Action for Climate Empowerment, that has been set up by the Paris Agreement. A few years after the United Nations created a global initiative called the Greening Education Partnership, the GEP here. And the idea was to switch progressively from ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, to CCE, climate change education, because there is a very strong need to address specifically this topic, and it's not the case at the moment. There is a lot of ESD programs everywhere, but when it comes to climate change, there is not nothing, but very few. And then, so the OCE, the Office for Climate Education, is one of the coordinators of this network. So it's a very large network, more than 100 countries, 1,700 organizations, academics, NGOs, ministries, and so on that are involved. And we are very active in two pillars. There are 4 pillars in the JEP. One pillar is about greening schools. Another one is greening curriculum, and we coordinate this pillar. The other one is greening capacities, so we are not the coordinators, but one of the most active partners in this pillar. And the other one is greening communities, and we don't work on that. Very recently, just a few days ago, actually, at the COP30 in Belém, in Brazil, there have been a very strong commitment. 160 countries decided to put education formally into their NDCs. The NDCs, if you know that, it's the National Determined Contributions. It's the commitment that all the countries have to commit to. And for the next COP, they will have to justify what they have done and prove evidence. So now that education has been officially recognized as part of the climate adaptation strategies, things will move. And for me, the real game changer is not that, it's the last one, PISA. The OECD, in charge of the PISA evaluation, came to me, actually, 1 year ago, saying that, there is no climate literacy assessment in the PISA evaluations. And we would like to develop this for the next PISA evaluation. So the next PISA evaluation in 2029 will contain some climate literacy assessments, and they have asked the OCE to be part of the expert group to design the evaluation framework and to develop the modules for the evaluation and so on. And this, for me, is a game changer because nobody wants to be the last student of the class. I mean, all the education system wants to be top ranked at the PISA evaluation. So now that they know that PISA will assess climate literacy, obviously it will create a lot of pressure for the education system to integrate climate change into the curricula and so on. So for me, this is the most important outcome here. Okay, so a few words about science. I mean education science. I will not speak about climate science. It's not the purpose today, but climate education has been developed during the last 15 years, basically. It's not as developed as ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, but there is a lot of initiatives, and there is already a lot of research on that. And we have already some evidences of strategies that are efficient and some that are not efficient. So I would like to share with you a little bit of this learning. I won't go into the detail, but I will give you all the sources if you want. So basically, two different sources of information, international reports like UNESCO, OECD, World Bank, etc., and research paper here as an example. But it's just a very few sample. To my opinion, it's the most important resources, but there is many more. Okay, so first of all, what are we talking about? When I say climate change education, it's not ESD in general. ESD is mostly problem-based pedagogy. And it put a lot of emphasis on the individual action, the small actions that we can all do in our daily life, switch off the light, sort the waste, etc., etc. It's very good, but it has almost nothing to do with climate change, and this kind of behavior change will not change anything to the climate system. So climate change requires an enormous shift in all our economy, our agriculture, food system, health system, work system, etc., energy, and so on. It has nothing to do with small individual actions. So if you only teach about ESD, you will miss that very important shift and a strategic objective and the systemic approach that is needed for climate education. So while ESD is much more problem-based, climate change education is mostly content-based, and it relies a lot on science education. So I think this is also the topic of your meeting at this moment, is how to use STEM education as a powerful tool to implement climate change education. And I think it's the right strategy. So for me, climate change education is a way also to bring ESD much more to content and science. Okay, so first, does it work? When we assess ESD program about climate literacy, the answer is no, it's not working. Classes doing ESD during years and years, when you assess students about their understanding of climate change, it's almost zero. So this is why you need specific climate change content and not general ESD in the class. So, but if you implement quality climate change projects in the classes, it is efficient. It has proven to be very efficient on different aspects. First of all, on students, which is the ideal situation because we want students to learn. It has proven efficient to develop not only the knowledge, but also the skills and the attitude. I mean, the behavior change and so on. But it also has proven to be efficient, not only for the students, but also for their families. A lot of research has been done on this topic, especially in Asia, actually, showing that when the students have learned about climate change, it also improved the knowledge and the attitude and the competencies of their families. And this effect is stronger with girls than with boys. It's not completely a surprise. I'm sure you know that. It's the same for health education. If you educate a young boy, you educate a young boy. But if you educate a young girl, you educate the whole family, basically. A lot of research has been done for decades on that. So yes, it works. And it works for the students, but also for the parents. So it's not only leading to action for tomorrow. I mean, when the students will will grow up and become full citizens, etc., etc. It's also efficient today because it changed the behavior of their parents also. This is why UNESCO here, Stefania Giannini, consider that education is one of the most powerful, or she says the most powerful climate adaptation action. Okay, so what works exactly? So, first of all, I would say that the main message here is that climate education is efficient when it has a very strong scientific background, backbone or background. Hopefully, climate science is universal, and you know that because you work on STEM education, even the science conceptions or misconceptions are universal or at least very similar from one region to another, which is good news. I mean, it means that you can think about climate education programs that share a lot of common materials and so on. Not everything, because you have to contextualize, but the general principles are the same and the general misconceptions are the same everywhere. When I did more than 500 trainings for teachers and teacher trainers on climate change in France, in Malaysia, in Sudan, in Latin America, and it's always the same misconception for the students, for the teachers, for the teacher trainers, for the policymakers, always the same misconceptions. And also the pedagogical approach that has proven to be efficient to deal with this misconception has proven to be efficient in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, in Latin America. So we can use the same strategies, which is a good news. And you know that already, but inquiry-based education is very powerful to cope with misconception. To work on nature of science I mean, to explicit the scientific process, not only the knowledge, but how we can do science, not only learn about science, but practice science. And what is different from a scientific fact, from a personal opinion, for example, to develop critical thinking and so on. And this is why we develop all our education material based on the IPCC reports, because it's the most solid, up-to-date, and generally approved science on climate change. So scientific background is very important for when it comes to climate education, but it is very important that we do not stick to science alone. If you do so, you will improve knowledge, that's for sure, but you will not change any behaviors. There is a lot of studies showing this knowledge-behavior gap. Inquiry-based science is not enough if you want to change the behaviors. It's one step that is necessary, but it's not sufficient. And worse than that, if you stick to science, you will develop knowledge, some skills, not all the skills, but most of the skills that you want to develop, but you will create a lot of anxiety because there will be a gap between the students, what they have learned, and what they are able to do. And if they feel powerless, they will be very anxious. So please, if you want to integrate climate change education, do not stick to science. Create a strong scientific background, but open to other disciplines, humanities, history, geography, language, arts, and so on. This is very important. I will come back on that later. So project-based learning, role-playing games, outdoors activities, everything here has proven to be very efficient to develop not only the knowledge, but also the skills and the attitude, and to come from anxiety to agency, actually. Okay, so the general objective is to develop what we call the self-efficacy. The self-efficacy is the trust you have in yourself to be able to behave accordingly to your values, basically. And this is really what it is all about when it comes to climate change education, because we want people to learn in order to be able to act, not only to learn for learning. So the good news is that for developing self-efficacy, each small success reinforces the process. So you have to start by doing projects that are very, very modest. You don't want to change the world. It will not work. So be very modest, and if you are very modest with your students, they will succeed, and each time they will succeed, it will reinforce their self-efficacy. The problem is that it works also in the opposite way. Each failure will completely cancel all the previous success. So let me share a personal example. The very first climate education program I launched was 15 years ago. It was called Climate, My Planet, and I. It has been implemented in 100,000 classes. So we have had a lot of feedbacks. And the first version of this project was very nice, very inquiry-based, etc., etc. But when we made a lot of assessments on this program. Few days after the end of the program, so it's several weeks learning pathway. At the end, there is kind of a charter that is collaboratively created in the class. Okay, how we want to behave to be climate ready, climate responsible, whatsoever. And so the students put a lot of statements. I have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do this, etc., etc. And at the end, you've got, let's say, 20, 30 statements, and the teachers say, okay, now we will be climate responsible and we will adopt this charter and change our behavior. If you assess concretely what happens at home, after a few days, it's okay. After a few weeks, half of the items are not followed anymore. After a few months, none. It has not changed anything on their behavior. And the problem is self-efficacy. in the 20 or 30 items, behaviors that they committed to, there is at least 1 or 2 or 3 they know from the beginning they will not be able to do. For example, if one action is get rid of the car, it's not the student to decide. It's his parents' decision to have a car or not to have a car. So from the very beginning, there is a bias. He will commit not to use car, but it's not his responsibility. So there is a failure, and this failure will encourage more and more and more failure, and at the end, there is nothing more. So you do exactly the same project, and at the end, you say, okay, we have this charter. Now, each one of you will choose just one action, one behavior, the one that you are sure that you will be able to do and to follow. And then you assess. After a few weeks, all the students follow the behavior they have chosen. After a few months, all the students follow this behavior plus a few more. And after 1 year or 2 years, you realize that most of the students follow most of what is inside the charter. Because you started very modestly, and step by step, each little success encourages the students to do more. So this is something very important. We have to be modest. We don't change the world. We don't save the planet. Saving the planet is something we always hear when we do ESD or CCE. It's very bad because, yeah, we don't save the planet when we educate or even when we change our individual behavior, it's not for saving the planet. It's for decreasing, for adapting, for mitigating whatsoever, but not saving the planet. And if you put strong emphasis on saving the planet, the result is that it will create a lot of anxiety because all the burden is on your shoulder. And it's very bad. And anxiety does not lead to action. Anxiety cuts any will to act. And there is also a lot of research on that. So, something I think you're very familiar with is the importance to contextualize and anchor what you do in the local context and also in the local culture. You don't want to have a gap between what you are doing in science and the local cultures, history, traditions, and so on. So it's very important to reduce the psychological barrier between the students and the topic. And it's very powerful to increase the motivation to act. So, as I said before, the objective is to come from anxiety to agency. As we said before, 80% basically of the students are anxious about 80%. So how to cope with this and how to transform this anxiety into action. So, science is efficient if it's not enough. Project-based learning is efficient. Simulations, role-playing games is efficient, etc., etc. And what is, to my opinion, the most efficient is this strategy, to make a mix between science activities and what we call narratives. I mean, working with arts, literature, music, plays, whatsoever. The objective is to cope with the doom and gloom story. The doom and gloom is often the only narrative that is offered to the students. I mean, we speak about collapse, dispersion of the Earth, saving the planet. The planet is not in danger, not at all. Human beings, not as a species, human beings will not disappear, but as individuals, some people are at stake, but not as a species and not as a planet. But because of this doom and gloom narrative and this lack of science understanding, it creates a lot of anxiety, and it does not mobilize. It cancels any mobilization for the force. So it's completely counterproductive to have this catastrophic narrative. So, and we have to create, we have to imagine a future that is desirable for the students. And very often it's difficult because there is a gap between what they learn. We have to be, we have to take care about our energy, our food, whatsoever. We have to be very low tech and so on. This is what they learn at school. But what they are dreaming about is completely different. They see soccer players, actors, etc., going to Dubai, to party, to so the thing they dream about is the total opposite of the thing that they have learned that it is good to do. So we have to create new models, and we have to make this future desirable for them. And this cannot be done by science. It has to be done by arts. And there is a very important complementarity. Okay. So, in a nutshell, if I want to sum up a little bit, climate education, now we have different frameworks. There is the Greening Education Partnership, who publishes curriculum guidance. There is the OECD, who published 3 days ago this new framework on climate literacy. There is the GreenCon, if you are very open, which is not your case. Now there is more and more and more international and recognized frameworks on climate education. And they are more or less very similar to each other. But what we see is that climate change as a topic has to be implemented into the curriculum. General ESD it doesn't for climate change. And it has to start at the primary school level. It's not only something that has to be studied by university students, it has to start early because you need to develop a lot of competencies that require time and that require a lot of feedback. It is very important to balance and to treat equally the knowledge, the attitudes, and the competencies, the skills. So this is why we have this. You have to talk equally to the brain, to the heart, let's say, and to the head. Understanding, feeling, and act. The 3 are equally important. And most of the time, education projects on climate change focus only on this. It's good, but it's not sufficient. So we have to develop critical thinking, to understand complexity, to develop ethic and empathy, and to learn how to act both individually and collectively, not only. Because once again, for climate change, individual change, they are always good, but it's not enough. Climate adaptation, climate mitigation requires both individual and collective actions. And for this to succeed, one aspect that is very at the very center of everything is teacher training. So, at the OCP, we do a lot of teacher training, as I said before. So far, we've trained more than 100,000 teachers. What research and practice actually shows that if you want to be efficient, if you want the teachers to be fully equipped, autonomous, and empowered to teach such a complex topic, you need at least 30 hours. Between 30 and 80, depending on the literature, depending on the region, or what they have done before, etc. But 30 hours is really the minimum that is needed. So basically, it's a 1 week teacher training workshop, 1 full week. It's really the minimum. Most of the time, I would say 50. It's better. So good teacher professional development for this kind of topic has to be really content focused, not just general competencies and so on. We have to anchor everything that we are doing into the content. So, for example, we will not have a general lesson on how to do inquiry. Basically, it's useless. What you have to do is to study the climate change topic. For example, why do the sea level rise? And by doing this, you will use inquiry-based approach. It's far better to do it that way than just to give a general lecture on what is inquiry-based approach. we have to focus to anchor into the content. Incorporate active learning, so we have to do, as we said, so if we require the teachers to use inquiry-based approach, as a teacher trainer, we have to do it by using this kind of approach. If you do not do a lecture to explain to a teacher that he does not have to do a lecture. If you want the teacher to create inquiry-based activities, when you train this teacher, you implement inquiry-based activities. It's obvious, but it's not always the case. And you have to provide feedbacks. So best professional development activities are split into different moments in the year. For example, a few days of training, then a few weeks or few months to let the teacher implement in their class. Then you meet again, you share what happened in the class. They will share between themselves. Also, the peer-to-peer learning is very important. And then you will come back with a new training and so on. And this is more efficient than just having a one-shot big training as a whole. Okay. And I will finish by just explaining to you what we have learned from our own projects. So I will give you an example. It's not the thing that have to be done. It's an example of the things that we have done, and we have learned some lessons about this kind of project. To my opinion, this project called ALEC, so ALEC in Spanish means Climate Education for Latin America. It's in terms of volume, it's the biggest climate education project that has been implemented worldwide. This is a project that we have been designing 6 years ago with the help of a dozen of local partners in Latin America. At the beginning, it was only Colombia and Mexico, and given the success of this project, it has now expanded to 6 other countries in Latin America: Peru, Costa Rica, Brazil, Ecuador, etc. And because ALEC has been very successful, I would like to share what has been done. First of all, what were the gaps that we have identified? Oops, sorry. Yeah. The gaps in these 2 countries, when we started the project, it was in Mexico and in Colombia. We identified the fact that there were no climate change education at all, and a very strong confusion between ESD and CC, between education for sustainable development and climate change education. It's not the same content, it's not the same pedagogical approaches. But for the policymakers, it was completely, they were confused between the 2 aspects. At this time, there were no even one single education material adapted to their context for teaching climate change. So we have to develop this. And there were no teacher training programs on this topic specifically. So what we have done is that we have worked with a dozen of partners, ministries of education, ministries of environment, academies of science, NGOs, to develop education materials. So instead of starting from scratch, you can start from scratch, but you will just lose time because you will reinvent the wheel. So instead of reinventing the wheel, they have used the resources that we at OCE have developed. It's generic resources. They are not adapted to Latin America. It's just generic resources. And we have worked all together with all the partners to adapt these generic resources specifically to Mexico, to Colombia, to Peru, to Ecuador, etc. It's very important to localize, not only to translate into the local language, but to localize, to adapt to the local curriculum, to adapt to the local climate situation, because the impacts are different, the solutions are different, the cultures are different, etc. So basically, we came from OCE resources to locally adapted resources, and we developed basically 100 of resources, lesson plans, videos, interactive animations, online courses, and so on. And we tested these resources. Not in some, yeah, they have been implemented in thousands of classrooms, but not tested. We tested it in a few dozens of classrooms, but implemented at scale. And then, what we have done is that we have trained a lot of teachers. First, OCE trained the teacher trainers of the different partners locally. And then these teacher trainers who have received an intensive climate change education program, then they were able to train the teachers locally in the different regions of Mexico, Peru, Colombia, and so on. Obviously, it is not the OCE based in Paris that is able to train teachers in Colombia. It's nonsense. So we train the trainers, and the trainers train the teachers. And in addition to training the teachers, they have also followed up what happened in the schools and supported the schools to implement their projects and so on. And it has been very successful. We have had hundreds and hundreds of projects that has been deployed in the schools, quality projects with improvement of knowledge, attitude, skills, with a strong work on climate mitigation or climate adaptation. So it's really climate change project. It's not we start to waste, and at the end we say we indicate to climate change. No, we work on climate change. And the last component of this project was capacity building, not for teachers, but also for the education systems as itself. So what we have done is that we collectively, OCE plus the local partners, thanks to this experience, after it's a 6 years project. So, for having this kind of impact, you need time. For developing resources, you need time. For training teachers and seeing the result in the class, you need time. And with all this experience, we were able also to support the Ministry of Education. It has led to change of the national curriculum in Mexico, in Colombia, in Chile, in Peru. So this project was large enough to be able to be scaled. It was not a full-scale project. It's not a proposed OCE is a small organization, 20 people. We cannot scale a project. What we can do is a pilot, and the local authorities, the ministries, this is their role to scale. But we support them for the pilot. The pilot has to be large enough. If it's just in a few schools, you are not able to scale. But it's for us, the good scale is a few hundred to a few thousands of teachers. Below that, you will have a pilot project, but it's not scalable because you will concentrate a lot of efforts on a very small population actually, and you know from the beginning that you will not be able to provide the same level of support to the whole system. So it has to be middle scale project, and for us the good scale is between a few hundred to a few thousands of teachers. So we made some capacity building workshops with the people working on the curriculum, with the people working on initial teacher education or in-service teacher training, etc., etc. We did a lot of outreach, so we presented what was done in the classes at the national level through big conferences, but also at the international level. For example, at the COP, we organized a lot of events to give visibility of this project at the COP. So it was very good for the ministries to see that their work was recognized at the international level. So it was very motivating for them to really be involved in that. So this project has been quite a success story, and now this project has been adapted. It's not exactly the same, but it has been adapted to Africa. We launched this year a new project, 4-year project in Africa. It's a bit different because we have learned from this project. The way we approach the teachers and we disseminate the project is a bit different. In Africa, we work with pilot schools. Instead of spreading generally to the country, we say, okay, we will concentrate the effort in a few dozens of schools. school in each country. So we will reach the same amount of teachers, but we will concentrate the follow-up to be able to measure more easily what happened. And I think that's it for me. So the general message is that good quality climate education has to rely on solid science, but not be limited to science. It has to involve active pedagogies, like inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, role-playing games, etc. What is key is teachers' professional development. We have to train teachers not only to provide education materials. The educational resources are useful, but if the teachers are not supported by dedicated training, it will not work. And if you want your project to be sustainable and scalable, it's also a good idea to work not only on the teacher training and resources, but also on peer-to-peer learning, communities of practice, to make sure that the scaling of the project will also be horizontal between the teachers, and not only top-down from the ministry to the classes. Horizontal dissemination is very important, and it gives an incentive to the ministries, all this international visibility and so on. Yeah, Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David, for that powerful keynote. Your insights would be really helpful for us to reimagine how STEM education can prepare our learners, not just to understand climate change, but to be part of the solution. So it's a very exciting presentation from Mr. David. So I would like to open the floor now for our audience members here. Does anyone have any questions or clarifications or insights that they just want to share with Mr. David? So we have one
here. First, I just, again, because we already passed the introduction, so thank you for the presentation. Can I call you David? Or?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Thank you, David, for the presentation. It's very inspiring. I just have actually first something that I need your clarification in terms of the project that's been going on. And in fact, actually, maybe there's already a report about the awareness and how actually school or how the climate change in terms of is it already implemented at school level that's been very quite useful actually for us in the Southeast Asian countries. It's not trying to reinventing the wheel, but in fact, actually, what happens already in different continents or different countries, that will be very useful for us to learn more and how actually we could assess better in future, especially in Southeast Asia. So it's more like actually what I would like to share my thought is in terms of whether that kind of assessment or that kind of study also planned to be implemented in Southeast Asian countries. First is that is the first question. Second one is actually some kind of input that definitely agree about the plan in terms of how we need to make it really integrated in terms of not just in the head but also in heart and also applied by your hands. So in practice, we have in Indonesia call it actually education, not just focusing on our cognitive, but in fact we have like a 4 competency model for teachers that include first is pedagogical, first is related to social context and personality, and the last one is social context. So this is actually aligned with what you are mentioning in your presentation. So, and in our perspective, maybe our colleague has mentioned that climate change education is not something new for us. In fact, some of our centers have already implemented in terms of the program that's been running on. But how actually we get the comprehensive understanding about climate change education? And I've been quite really inspired by your presentation. In fact, Me personally thought that when we talk about climate change education or climate change, it's actually part of SDG. So in fact, you said that it's actually totally different, but I'm trying to understand in terms of how we need to assess. I agree with you when you say that climate change is definitely different from SDG, because when we try to compare it, we need to have a framework, indicators. That's definitely different. In that term, that is totally different from SDG. But in terms of how we need to sustain and we need to support the SDG, and that also includes later on how we support our education to be aligned with climate change education. I think there's a connection that we need to understand, because in Indonesia, first our minister in terms of education, we try to understand that it is something important for us to grasp or to master technology, to mention digital technology, but it is also important to make it very simple, to make it very inclusive. So with a lot of terminology that's been introduced by UNESCO or by CMEO to schools, this is something that I think we need to understand how to make it simple, so they actually understand this is what climate change in terms of that we need to integrate with our education or school, but also how to know that, in fact, who knows, in Southeast Asia, maybe we do not understand about what climate change is in the concept, but in fact, in our local culture understanding, they already apply it in their daily activity life. So this is something that's worth for us to map the situation that's different from different continents. So thank you again for this initiative.
Thank you. A long question, maybe different questions inside your questions. I will not forget half of your questions, but feel free to come back. I will start by the difference between climate change topic and general SDGs, because obviously climate change belongs to, it's one of the sectors, SDGs, climate action, and so climate change education is also part, in a sense, of education for sustainable development. My point, I've been a bit caricatural. My point is not to make an opposition between the two approaches. Climate change is part of ESD, climate change education, but it requires a specific effort. And maybe I have to be more specific about why it requires a specific effort. First, let's do a comparison. Basically, if you're working on water quality or waste management, if you have a pile of rubbish next to the school, it's immediately visible. I mean, the students, they will see the problem. And not only they will see the problem, but they will be able to act on it and to see immediately the result of your action. For climate change, it's completely different. Nobody sees climate change. What we see is the weather. It's not the climate. Climate is long-term evolutions, averages over 30 years in large-scale regions, etc. And what we see is not the climate change itself, it's the some of the consequences of climate change. For example, more extreme events, more growth, rise of the sea level, but it's very indirect. You do not see the climate, and you feel the weather, but you don't feel the climate. So you do not see the problem there. You cannot feel it, and you cannot act on it. I mean, you can act, but you will not see the effect of your action. If you sort the waste, at the end, there is no waste anymore. The problem has been solved. When you act for climate mitigation, for example, you say, oh, I will use a bike instead of a car. It will not change the climate. The climate systems, there is a strong inertia in the climate system. If you cut all the CO2 emissions today, for example, if you snap and humanity disappears from the Earth, climate will continue to war during 50 years. So even if you kill all the human beings on the planet, the global temperature will continue to increase during 50 years because of the inertia of the climate system. So it's difficult to motivate, to act on something or problem that you do not see. And if you act, you do not see the effect of your action. So it's costly, it costs you to change your behavior and you do not see the benefit. But the benefit exists, but they are just not tangible. It's also a problem of scale. You've got some problems like biodiversity, waste, water that are local, and some other problems that are global. And climate change is global, and we know that for young students, it's very difficult to manage to manipulate mentally these global aspects. So when we educate climate change, we always have to shift from local issues, because it's very important to anchor what you are studying into the daily life of your students and so on. And it's also necessary to embrace this global aspect, because climate change is a global phenomenon. And if you are alone in your village to cope with climate change, to mitigate your emissions, etc., it will not change anything. So, but if you sort waste, it will be solved because it's a local problem. So local versus global, long-term versus short-term, invisible versus visible, and complex versus simple. I mean, waste is not a complex subject. Climate change is very complex. Not complex does not mean difficult in my mind. It just means that it has a lot of components, and understanding the behavior of each component, for example, the sun, the Earth's atmosphere, the ocean, etc. Understanding each component individually do not enable you to understand the system, because what matters is not how each component works, but how the components interact with each other. But this is what a complex system is. And we are not used to study this, and our education system are not prepared to teach complexity. There is another aspect, is that climate change is probably the only SDG that is politically controversial. Trump does not say that we don't need clean water, but he says climate change is a hoax. And this is the only topic, no, maybe not the only, but among the few ones that are completely controversial, despite the fact there is a complete scientific consensus. It appears to be something we are not sure, etc. It's controversial, but it should not be, because scientifically it's not controversial, but politically, yes. And it's not only controversial, but it's very politically charged. Maybe it's not the case in Asia, but in America, as a teacher, if you study climate change in your class, you are in danger for your career and so on, because you are identified as an activist and Democrat versus a Republican or whatsoever. So it's more than ever on this topic. You need to work on critical thinking. It's not the case for clean water or good health. Emotions. Climate change is not the only topic that creates eco-anxiety, but it's the main one. Other topics like biodiversity also contributes to eco-anxiety, for example. But climate change is really emotionally charged. And also this justice aspect, because of its global phenomenon. So people who emit the more greenhouse gases are not the people who suffer the more from the effect. And this is quite a unique phenomenon. For example, the greenhouse gases are emitted in the northern and industrial countries, and the people who suffer the most from the greenhouse effect are basically people who produce the less. Africa, for example, 4% of the emissions and 99% of the problems. Southeast Asia also is very much affected. But you know, so all these specificity, scale, visible, invisible, complex, etc., requires a specific attention. It doesn't mean that we have to do climate change only and not ESD. It means that climate change is particularly difficult to teach. And this is why maybe when you look at what is done in the classes, almost no teachers work on climate change because it's difficult. And it's far easier to work on waste, water, biodiversity. Biodiversity is complex, but not as complex. No, sorry, if I say, in terms of complex system, biodiversity is as much complex as climate, and maybe more complex. But in terms of political charge, emotional charge, visible, invisible, local, global, etc., at the end, it's a topic that is less difficult to teach than climate change. So because it's very difficult, we need a specific effort to develop that. Because otherwise, nobody will do it. This is just my purpose. So I don't want to oppose climate change belongs to ESD, but needs a specific approach. I'm not sure, maybe I missed the other part of your questions. I tried to remember, you mentioned, is it possible that in Southeast Asia we implement climate change education programs like the one that's presented, and is it possible that we work together? Yes, definitely. Actually, this is why I'm here today. OCE is not the Smithsonian. We don't have anything to sell. We are non-profit. All our resources are free, our trainings are free, etc. So I'm not the seller. I'm not here to sell anything, and I'm not here to do business. I'm here to do collaboration because this is our DNA. So our mission at the OCE is to support the education systems because we want to bridge this gap between theory and practice. In theory, UNESCO, Green Curriculum, OECD, COP, NDC, everything is green. But in practice, nothing really happens in the classes. We want to bridge this gap. To bridge this gap, we have to support teachers, resources, training, communities, and we have to support education systems, curriculum reforms, pilot programs, expertise, evaluation, whatsoever. So my motivation to be here is to work together with you because you know the field, I know the field in Southeast Asia. I've come quite several times in Malaysia to work with the ISTIC or with Rexan in the past, but it does not mean that I know the Malaysian context, not at all. I mean, I do not know your education system, I do know a bit about your climate system, but not so much. And so I will not be able to design a project for you. But given our past experience on different situations, what I think I am able to do is to work with you. You have the local knowledge and you have the expertise on STEM education or innovation or whatsoever. And together, I think we can learn from each other and build a program that is appropriate and that also learns about the lessons that we are from the previous implementation or from the scientific literature because it's quite abundant at this moment. And if you ask another question, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Okay, thank you for that question. We also have two comments from online sending their regards. One is from Ms. Rotai Chomsui from the National Science and Technology Development Agency of Thailand. She says, "Your presentation was truly insightful and inspiring. It has given me many meaningful ideas for enhancing our climate change activities. Thank you, David." And another one from Simio Ragfon from Ms. Dwi Nastiti Iswanti. "Thanks, David, for your inspiring sharing. Looking forward to opportunities to integrate CCE to our existing school capacity building activities." And I think we have one more question here from the room.
So thank you so much. I think it's a very insightful presentation um, the results from your evaluation were very stunning. That you say that the girl has more effective on that. It made me wonder why. My colleague that maybe why. That's the resonate of what we found in Thailand. We have an assessment, and many of the students, many of the youth in Thailand has been encountered with the suffering of the eco-anxiety because of they are aware of the climate change from the news, from the neighbor. However, they don't know how to deal with it. They encounter without knowledge. I think that resonates with what the contextual in Thailand. What I would like to ask a question that I would like to ask you, which I didn't see in the presentation, which is I think that on the prompt of you talking about climate change, in your context, you're talking about maybe the phenomenon of the climate change. In Thailand, in many cases, we learn about climate change from this aspect, right? And for example, because Thailand as the top ranked of the global as the at risk of the flood, we are at the fourth. Next from Egypt, next from, so that I think that our student have learned about climate change in a hard way, not as a phenomenon. So from your sense of that, how do you deal with that content? I know you said it's conflict, but in any kind of conflict, you need an entry point. And then secondly, I think I'm wondering that you're talking about the success of how the students have done the small project and everything. I'm just wondering that the other enabling factor, for example, I think that, technology, digital, is something like that, which is, escalate that kind of learning. Because as I work with the community and the student in the community, what they have a question, and as well as the teacher as well, that it seems like everyone have the content, open source, tools and platform on the digital platform. If you have low digital literacy, it means that you can be left behind. So I'm just wondering for your case, that if you can give an example for that.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with just what you said. For the digital tools, this is very important that each time you propose an activity that requires digital facilities, internet, tablet, phone, whatsoever. It's very important that each time you propose that, you propose the equivalent as a low-tech. And this is what we are doing. We develop a lot of activities like simulators or serious games that you can use online or download that on your phone or your tablet. And each time we do that, we propose a unplugged version of that, like a board game, a simulator that you can do with your body. So we have sport activities, for example, to understand the greenhouse effect. But you can also use multimedia animation to do that. If you don't have, actually, even if you have the unplugged versions are always better because you focus on the topic and there is no mediation. And so you focus on your skills useful for the activity and climate change and so on, and not on the digital literacy itself. So even for the teachers, when we provide materials that are online materials like lesson plans or online courses, etc., we always provide a paper version, and we send the paper version for free to the teachers who ask for it as soon as we have money for that. So for example, our last lesson plan, the topic was climate change and ocean. And we provided 10,000 copies for free. It's a 200 pages document. It's not just a flyer with 2 pages. It's 200 pages notebook, and we printed and we sent for free 10,000 copies for that. So we we try as much as possible to complement digital aspects by unplugged simple aspects. And what you said about experiment is right. It's a very powerful way to enter the problem. The same in France, for example. France is not as concerned as you are by flooding, because we don't have monsoon and so on, and you have. But France is very much concerned by heat waves, much more than Thailand or Southeast Asia, much more. Now we are sometimes in some regions in France we can have almost 50 degrees in a few days, and while the normal temperature for these cities are 25. So it's a very specific climate situation, and obviously working on heat waves is very powerful to make people feel that climate is changing. But even if it's very powerful, it's a bit fragile. And now we have, we are experiencing during the last 2 to 3 years an increase of climate denials, and they say that but it's normal that that it is hot because it's the summer, because there is a cycle for the sun, because of whatever you can imagine. There's always a good reason to explain the heat wave instead of saying climate is changing. So it's a powerful tool to use extreme events as an entry point, but it's not magical. I mean, there is also some resistance on that. But I agree with you. It's better to have an entry point that makes sense, that is something tangible for the people. It can be an experiment, but it can be also a community-based project. This village has decided to replant trees or to get rid of cars or whatever you can imagine. So, and this is your entry point, this is your enabling factor, as I said. So how can we use that? Why did they decide that? What is the context, etc.? And then you will understand why it makes sense, and you will study that with your students. It can be a newspaper, it can be the COP, it can be whatsoever. A new technology, why is it interesting? Yeah. But you're not obliged to start by just studying the greenhouse effect and the greenhouse gases. It's better if you start by something that is in the news, in their life, in their immediate surrounding.
Okay, we have another question here from our.
Thank you for your presentations, and you mentioned that teacher training is the key. And I was surprised about the sustained durations that you said, like 50 hours, something to 80s. So I would like you to share, like, are you doing that continuously for 50 hours? Like, and what the component and the ratio of each component in that 50 hours? Because in Thailand, we only do like 18 or 20. Maybe because of that, it's not so sustainable.
Yeah, but it's not bad. I mean, in France, if you have 3 hours, you're lucky. So if you have 20, I would like to say my French teachers to Thailand, because yeah, the in-service training, in-service teacher training in France has collapsed, almost disappeared. Anyway, actually, it depends on the local aspects. So each time we organize a workshop, each time is different. It depends on the local needs. I can give you examples. For example, recently, meaning last week, 2 persons from my team were in Kenya for a teacher training workshop, 1 week workshop. So 1 day to work on the climate system itself, the origin of climate change, so studying the greenhouse effects, studying the different components of the climate system and so on. And we did not do that by giving lectures, but only inquiry-based activities with different disciplines, physics, biology, mathematics, but also sport, I mentioned sport activities. etc. One day on ocean and climate, because it was something they wanted to deepen a little bit, because they are very sensitive to the rise of the sea level, because of the ocean acidification and so on. So one day, to make a lot of experiments, we came to Kenya with an enormous luggage full of material to make 20 or 30 experiments, different experiments. One day about analyzing teaching practicals using videos, for example, and working on the difference between the different approaches, project-based, inquiry-based, etc. One day, 2 days working on designing your own climate education project for your own school. And so we do not design the project, the participants design their own project, but we help them to give birth to a project that is interesting. So this is an example of a one-week workshop. But sometimes we do other workshops when we work with policymakers. It's not exactly the same, and we do not have 1 week with policymakers. Basically, one day or it's enough, but you work much more on evaluation, impact assessment. But even with policymakers, I always do a little bit of inquiry-based activities for them to feel and to understand exactly what it means. So yeah, there is no general way of training people. It really depends on the local needs, but what is interesting for us is to interact with the people who require our support and say, okay, what is your need? What have you done before? What do you plan to do after? How does it fit into your strategy? And then we will design together the workshop. And when it's possible, we ask if the people want to co-facilitate the workshop with us. Sometimes, yes, sometimes people say, oh, we are completely new to the topic, we prefer you to facilitate. And for the first time, and so for example in Malaysia, a few years ago we have had a workshop with the ISTIC. It was 3 consecutive workshops reparted on 2 years, and the objective that the first one we facilitate clean ourselves, OCP animated all the workshops during 1 week. The second time, we co-animated with the local trainers that we have trained before. And the last time, they were the animators, we were here just in support, helping them, etc. And at the end, they were completely autonomous and able to spread at large scale. So it's an example of capacity building.
Okay, thank you so much, David. Unfortunately, I think that's all the time we have for now. So it has been a very fruitful discussion, and we all learned a lot from you. So I invite everyone, while we have this memorable opportunity that we have David here with us, to have a group photo with him. So can we request everyone to please join us here in front for a group photo. And after this group photo, it's now time for the break. So you will have the opportunity to refresh yourselves. Mr. David.
Participants? So, how many participants did you have? YouTube lang. Can we share your presentation to others? Of course. Okay, thank you. No. No. No one got it. I'll tell you.
Can we compress a bit more? There's more space in the back there. Okay. You're not, the ladies in the back, you cannot see. So there's so many people here and a bit of blank space there, so we can request some of the ladies here to join the other side. Okay. Join the other side, just so it's more balanced. Okay. Happier, please. Freestyle. Okay, thank you. So now it's time for our breaks. We will reconvene in 15 minutes. It's an opportunity not just to refuel your food, but also your energy. Because as I said earlier, this is a co-creation space, so we will also ask for your inputs. You have an opportunity to think about what you will share. Thank you.
Your name is?
Stream. And live stream.